Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Friday Forum. Use the chat buttons to let us know where you're from. We'd love to hear from you, whether you're in Silicon Valley, New York, or anywhere in between. Today, we welcome Bospar to our Friday Forum to discuss human rights and pride in PR. Today's panel will be moderated by Brett Larson. He's an award-winning multimedia journalist with decades of experience producing technology and consumer news. He worked for major networks including CNN and Fox. His expertise includes writing compelling stories, on-air talent, live reporting, and interfacing with public relations professionals. Thank you to Brett and his team and Bospar Communications. Over
Hey,
to
Megan.
you, Brett.
Megan, thanks for having us today. It's kind of a sad day to be talking about human rights, considering that 50% of our population just lost autonomy over their own bodies because of a Supreme Court decision. And we'll be talking about that a bit today. Bospar has done some surveying over the past few weeks as we head into Pride Weekend. It's Pride Weekend in San Francisco. It's Pride Weekend here in New York. June is Pride Month. The history of Pride is long and storied, and starts as a very interesting inception. But given what the current political climate is right now, many in the PR industry are struggling with how do you respond to these human rights issues, both in your PR agency and in the companies that you work with. I'm going to bring in my colleagues here that are joining me today from Bospar, Tom, Raquel, and Sean, and we're going to have a little conversation about this. So welcome, everybody. All right. We'll do a quick round of introductions with everybody, and we'll get started. So, Tom, we're going to start with you since you're the highest position on the totem pole today.
Hi there, I'm Tom, principal at Bospar, and a gay man in PR for upwards of 20 plus years. And so I think that's my main qualification for the panel today. I am coming to you from San Francisco.
Raquel.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Senior Content Director at Bospar, and before I was at Bospar, I worked at a tech startup for 5 years. But the bulk of my background that might be especially relevant today is that I was an AP US government, US history, and Latin teacher for 20 years. As a result of that, I was lucky enough to have a National Endowment for the Humanities Fellowship in Jurisprudence to study with Austin Serrett, who's a constitutional law expert, quoted by former Chief Justice Rehnquist, liberal and conservative justices alike. And it's interesting I bring that up because that experience focused on Roe and on death penalty cases. So it was a human rights focused experience. So coming to you from that angle today.
And Sean.
I'm Sean Levy. I'm a vice president here at Bospar. I've worked in the industry for about 20 years. My experience runs the gamut truly from HR tech and ad tech and MarTech to entertainment and celebrity to consumer lifestyle. Kind of been all over the map. I've worked with some iconic brands from Heineken, Samsung Mobile, and IKEA, but I've been lucky enough to combine my passions and work on a lot of LGBTQ plus clients as well in that space. And it's one of the spaces I enjoy the most. So looking forward to having this chat today.
Awesome. Well, welcome to my colleagues. Welcome to everybody who is watching us today on various streaming platforms. It's great to have you here. If you have questions for us at any point, feel free to drop them into the chat. We'll try and get them answered for you. We're going to kick off with a few questions amongst ourselves. Sean, I'm going to start with you. I don't want to speak for everyone on the panel. I can speak for myself as well. I'm also an openly gay man. I'm married to my husband, and hopefully that won't get overturned because that would be really crappy. I live in New York City, and yes, I was an openly gay man working on air at Fox News for almost 7 years, and we can touch on that a little bit later. I'm sure there's going to be some questions about that, and I can tell you what it was like. But Sean, let's start with you. What is your experience as an LGBTQ professional in this current climate?
So I'm also openly a gay man. As I alluded to in my introduction, I've worked in many different PR industries. It's actually one of the aspects I love most about PR, kind of embraces my natural ADD and allows me to work on many things that don't always have anything in common. It's essentially how I came to work in the LGBTQ plus space. At my first agency, we had landed Scruff, which is an international social media app for men seeking men. And when the time came to staff it, they kind of just placed me on the account, which actually turned out to be a really incredible experience. It was one that allowed me, again, to combine those aspects of both my personal and professional life. And it ultimately led to some really other great opportunities. I was able to be part of the team that helped to launch the Queer as Folk creator Russell T Davies' new shows, Cucumber and Banana, for local TV back in 2015, and to present day efforts where I'm part of the efforts, again, helping to lead PR for San Francisco's Pride Return celebration this year, which is going to be amazing, as well as Gangels, which is a leading LGBTQ plus investment syndicate, should I say, which just this year launched a book highlighting 100 of the most successful entrepreneurs in that space. And in the 10 years that I've been in the space, it's interesting. I've seen a lot of change. I remember having to pitch back in the day and having to be very targeted with the types of media that we could go to, knowing that getting stories in top tier mainstream outlets, it was possible, but it really wasn't the norm. And despite that not being that long ago, the number of reporters telling stories about LGBTQ plus community was fairly limited. Thankfully, things have changed. Stories are much more normalized and much more part of the pop culture zeitgeist. And that's important, especially now, given this current climate, when there's obviously a large constituent of people that are looking to silence these voices. So now more than ever, I think it's really important for us as PR professionals, when we have these stories to highlight, to really highlight that full rainbow of voices of our community and make sure that these stories are being told.
Tom, I'm sure you have something to add to this. As principal, you oversee this entire group. We are fortunate in that we are in New York, in San Francisco. You are in a bit of a protected bubble in this space, and you're the boss. You're in charge, so no one's going to tell you how to live your life outside of work. So how do you handle this? Because this has been a big lift. I mean, I'm not going to share too much behind the scenes, but it's been a bit of a busy morning for us as an agency, just kind of navigating the waters of what just dropped in our lap this morning.
Yeah, at 8:03 a.m., I got a quick text, turned on the TV and took a look, and then we sprung into action. So needless to say, it's been a heavy day. And of course, the ripple effect for the purpose of this panel is with the concurrent opinion that gay marriage needs to be reconsidered. So you alluded to that. In fact, Joe Biden made that connection in his speech just this morning. So whatever happens, we are putting our people first and challenging the industry and ourselves to make a difference. In fact, you'll see a press release on that shortly to make public what we're doing. And we'd like to see every agency follow suit. So I'm not sure that I've really been personally affected by being a gay man in PR, but you're never 100% sure. And sometimes that means holding back, staying quiet. And so we set out to create an agency where people can thrive without that restriction.
And Raquel, I know you have an amazing amount of knowledge about which we've been sharing the past couple of days as we've been preparing for this. You have an amazing amount of knowledge over the way our government works and the way these court cases are decided and what they do. I'm very much paraphrasing here because I'm not a lawyer, but what they do to sort of go point by point to make laws, to change laws, and in this case, to undo precedent. How do you think Roe versus Wade being overturned will be connected to the LGBTQ community? And how do you think it will affect you personally and professionally?
Well, yeah, it's I'm the background exists because of being the teacher and in particular teaching the civil rights and civil liberties cases to 12th grade and then at a college. First I would say that I'm shaken to my core, right? As a woman and as a lesbian, I'm shaken to my core. And I started to identify as gay in my 30s. So I've kind of been all over the gamut in that respect. It's inescapable to me and to a lot of women that the Supreme Court ruling today makes women second-class citizens, legally speaking, at least in half of the states. But it's we're taking a basic human right and we are now chopping it up via states instead of having a single voice on that, as we have for 50 years. My entire life has been under the protection of Roe. But something you asked about, Brett, that really both what we've been talking about in terms of pride and the initiatives Bospar has taken with respect to speaking out against "Don't Say Gay" laws in Florida, the protecting female employees' reproductive rights who are in Texas and other places. The common denominator is that we're seeing a movement against the 14th Amendment's interpretation for the last 75 years. So ever since, just before Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka in 1954, which ended, school segregation, we've had cases built upon this that are all about the interpretations of the due process clause of the 14th Amendment and the equal protection of the laws clause of the 14th Amendment. And we're seeing a concerted effort that has finally culminated in something that's hard to believe, right? A concerted effort to strike at the heart of how the 14th Amendment has been interpreted and to change that and to dismantle women's rights, the rights of gay people. All of these things are rooted in this amendment, and today's ruling strikes at the heart of the logic behind the ruling, the logic behind previous rulings. So it's a real tough moment today, and it's real disturbing. And I know we can get into those specific court cases that we were talking about. But one thing I wanted to point out too is that, in Bospar's survey, we found, we aligned with the recent Marist and NPR survey, finding that 64% of Americans do not want Roe overturned. 68% of women do not want Roe overturned. Those are national polls, scientific polls, finding that. Ours is a little bit more recent, finding that 72% of Americans don't want to see Roe overturned. And it's interesting too, that half of Republican women don't want to see Roe overturned. So we're seeing this upheaval of the majority, and we're all wondering what the implications are for human rights across the spectrum, rights of people to marry, whether homosexuality will be recriminalized, right. Those kinds of issues.
It's a difficult thing, to think about. Obviously, my ability to get married was based on a Supreme Court decision. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg talks about that quite frequently when he talks about his marriage, and it's frightening to think that you could lose that. There's a lot of things we could lose rights. Women could lose rights to accessing contraception if some of these other cases are overturned. That survey that Bospar did recently about Pride coming into Pride weekend and heading into Pride month, which is we're almost at the end of it. One of the statistics that jumped out at me, and it just because it was so almost right down the middle, was: do you believe the current political climate suggests that LGBTQ plus rights are under attack? And only 51% of people said no. Like you would hope for something that damning. It would be you did maybe at least get to 60%. Tom, the Bospar Messes with Texas campaign was one of the first big things that I recall. I recall that because I was working at Fox at the time, and I remember Curtis reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, do you want to interview me?" And I said, "Let's talk offline and have dinner." and here I am. But that was a big deal, and I feel like Bospar was first out of the gate, almost like they were ready at the second that abortion bill went into effect. How was that received by the employees here when it happened?
Well, we'd been talking about it for a while. The issue was bubbling up, and we had staff concerns. And frankly, we owe our people reproductive health care assistance. We owe our people, if they need it, travel. We owe our people moving expenses if needed in a situation like that. And so we just took a look at it and said, we have to do something. And a statement is really not enough. It needs to be followed by immediate action. And so we had a conversation about that and decided, let's just do it. You know, I think that people will appreciate us taking a stand. And the fact is, 80% of Americans are behind us on this. So we went ahead and moved forward with it. And we found that many different large companies, after we tested the waters, followed suit. And so we think that's an important thing. It's part of the value system at Bospar. And now we're looking at the similar situation today, and we'll be doing the same thing today. And I think that to your question about, has there been reactions to it, fallout, etc. One thing that surprised me was the recruiting benefit. I didn't necessarily expect that, but what happened was, as we were, continuing to hire, and to anyone who's listening, we are continuing to hire. We found that there were a lot of people who came to us and said, you know what, I applied today and I took this job over another one, or I came to you because you aren't afraid to do this and step out and make a statement like this. And that's important to me personally as an individual. And we really got a lot of that super positive feedback. The internal feedback was just amazing, especially when we rolled it out. Everyone said, hey, so proud to work here and appreciate you standing up for us. And as we all know, a large percentage of the folks who work in PR are women.
Uh-oh.
Tom has frozen.
He's been having some connectivity issues.
Are women is what he was saying.
Yeah,
And that is
where.
it's right on. I would just add too that like Tom was saying, we've got choices about where to work. Younger people have choices, and work is so interwoven. Oh, Tom's back. But a company is a role model for employees, like Tom was saying, and it's to know your company has your back.
Yeah.
To know you can speak up about fundamental issues. It matters a lot.
Yeah, and I would add to that too. Part of what drew me to Bospar was that two of the principals were gay men, and obviously one's a woman as well, and they kind of understand, some of those unique needs, and just that culture. And it was when I had read about Bospar Messes with Texas, it was just further validation that I had made the right choice.
Yeah, it's it is a comforting thing to know that, when you have, I mean, I remember many decades ago, and I spent the bulk of my career in media. So, we're talking radio and TV, and those places are surprisingly not as liberal as you might assume. I remember when I was doing weekends at a radio station in San Francisco, one of my colleagues was getting married, and my boss at the time was saying, he's going to get the extra production hours because he's getting married. So he's a man now. So he needs to make more money. And I just remember being so shocked by that just blatant discrimination. And the guy who said it probably had no idea how offensive what he was saying was. But again, there's so many times we're exposed to these things. I think especially as men, I think other men are comfortable saying things to us because they think we agree and think like them. I've heard some real choice commentary from some of my straight male former colleagues in media. So it is definitely nice to be in an environment where we're all kind of on the same page when it comes to how we treat each other and how we respect one another. So that's a good thing. Was there, when the Bospar Messes with Texas campaign went out, was there any blowback from any of our clients?
If that's for me, and by the way, I'm sorry that there are tech issues. I said brilliant things, I promise. But if that's for me, I will say this. We had zero fallout from clients. We heard nothing but positive feedback, and of course, we were willing to take that if the case happened that we did receive some blowback from clients. We thought that's a perfectly acceptable outcome for the stand that we've taken, but it didn't happen. We really didn't receive that. The most we received in terms of negative feedback came in the form of internet trolls, and I think that's a kind of fringe side of things. And so we didn't get a ton of that, but we got a little bit of that. Other than that, I think it's been a very positive experience. And so I want people to know that that's the case, because we're encouraging other folks to follow suit. Putting out a press release is one thing, but it's not just marketing. It's trying to encourage change in the industry. And that's what we're doing. That was the purpose of Bospar Messes with Texas, which was, hey, everyone, it's okay to take a stand on these kinds of issues if you have some relation to it. And certainly we have employees there who were concerned. So that's the goal. And I think that if we can do the same thing with today's Roe announcement, I think we'll be doing our part.
And in fact, we had clients, just to piggyback on that, we had clients who asked for our insight in helping them craft their messages that were in opposition to what was happening in Texas.
And that's continuing today with the Supreme Court decision. The internet trolls, I mean, those were always, when I worked at Fox, those were always my favorite things to interact with, because they're so stupid. They don't even spell anything right, and you read it and you just giggle and think, wow, how unfortunate that you can type. What now though, the other issue that we can deal with, and we had to deal with this a lot in the newsroom, is the social justice issues, because it's a sensitive subject. It affects different people in different ways. Different people have different reactions to certain things. Obviously, it's a lot based on your own life experience. How do you navigate that? And Tom, I'm sorry to keep throwing all the questions at you, but I'll go to you again for that. But how do you navigate that in the workplace when you have an issue that maybe everybody isn't in 100% agreement on? Maybe there are some differing of opinions, and it seems like now everything's so polarizing that there's no middle ground narrative anymore.
Yeah, and we encourage open conversation. We are a very, very flat organization. Anybody can come to me or anyone else with any concern that they have and any conversation that they want to have, not just about social justice.
Uh-oh.
Well, we can guesstimate where he's going with that.
Not just about social justice, but about a huge range of issues, really.
Right. Raquel, I'm going to drag you in to this because you were talking about when you were a teacher and how that was so different from working at a technology company, and how you felt like you were free to just say and do and because you were informing people.
That's right. And so my years as a teacher, there are exceptions, but by and large, that environment is across the board, really is one that is open, one that encourages views, even contradictory views, but discussion of issues, and certainly teaching young people to think for themselves, to keep an open mind, to be aware of history and facts, and to know, there's always a story behind Supreme Court decisions, and they're wonderful, amazing, human issue stories, social justice issue stories, but they're very real, and students connect with those, and you're able to discuss all of that in this environment. When I shifted to technology and joined a startup, of course there were some wonderful people there, but I found the environment strikingly different. Right, there wasn't that freedom to discuss, didn't exist. There were snarky jokes that really were that technology has a reputation for having this kind of dialogues going on in the background, and some of that is really true. Mm-hmm. left that environment and came to Bospar, I felt like I was back with the teachers again. And that's, I think that's a high compliment to the company, that there is what Tom was saying, this freedom to have views, to be respectful, to be supported.
Yeah, and I think that as long as you are fostering a respectful culture, those conversations can take place without becoming uncomfortable or overly political. If it were the case that somebody, even in a physical office, were getting into a fight about something, of course you would say, hey, this has gone too far. I don't think that's what we have. I think we have nice, respectful conversations about things, and I think that's what we have to have in order for everyone to move forward. It doesn't matter what side of any issue you're on. Listening is the most important thing.
That's, I mean, Raquel, what you were saying about being in education, and Tom, what you were saying about, an open, respectful environment, that was always what I loved about being in a newsroom. I remember, and people who are watching who have worked with me in the past will know this about me, is I don't tend to hold back when I think something, and if I'm going to say something, I'm going to say it out loud. And that was always great in the newsroom, because you could do that. You could say, this is freaking ridiculous, or look at this stupid thing, or that idiot mayor once again did this dumb thing. You could say that because you know that you're in a room full of people, not of people who all agree with you, but of people who are saying, it's a dumb decision, but he also did this and that was right. You can have those balanced conversations. That was mostly the case. When I worked at Fox, we just had different, more conversations were more in hushed tones and not really spoken out loud. Do we think, corporate America has for so long stayed out of social issue? Well, for the most part, with the pride issue, that's a recently new thing, but companies do now seem to be taking a stand. And should companies be taking a stand on social issues, on human rights issues, on these these DEI initiatives? Should they be public and pushy about what they're doing?
I'm going to add a little bit here. It certainly depends on the company to some degree, but some issues just feel too fundamental to ignore. And I think that that's where we're at as a society, that sure, you don't want to get political at work all the time. The focus is on the business and the value you're offering customers. But we're at a point, and you were talking about the polarization earlier, but we're at a point where, hey, Roe overturned 50 years of a basic human right that was recognized across the nation is, ostensibly gone. And those and as a woman, there's nothing else that's more important today or next month, or, there are very few things that are as important as addressing that. So even if one wants to compartmentalize, it's really not possible with something so basic. We do have, I'll divert us for 1 second. We've got a question from Kathy Keller in the feed there.
Yeah, which kind of weighs into what we're talking about now.
Yeah, it is a great question. I would say.
Can we read that aloud?
Yeah, sure. So Kathy says, our company has put PR and social media on hold today. What's your opinion about when to resume business as usual? Because we want to be respectful and sensitive to people's feelings and reactions to the Supreme Court decision. I think that's a very smart idea. Coming from the newsroom, I can say the one thing that always really upset me with PR people was when we were dealing with these huge breaking news stories, and I would get this one-off pitch about something that has absolutely nothing to do with what we're working on. If your company has something to add to that narrative, then you should absolutely be adding to that narrative. But now is definitely not. I don't think now is the time to be reaching out for much else. Tom, I'm sure you have an opinion on this as well.
You'd have to have something really compelling to add to that narrative for it not to seem like tasteless ambulance chasing. And so I definitely agree with that. At the same time, there are some tech reporters who are nowhere near that story. And they may need to still publish something today where, if you're still having that conversation with them, that may be appropriate. But I definitely agree. This is a very, careful day in terms of what you're doing. And then maybe to the question, should there be a kind of social media blackout? I'm not sure if that was part of the question, but not from our standpoint in terms of if you have something positive to say about this, but it might be considered inappropriate for you to say, hey, check out our webinar. And, right now is the time when no one's thinking about your webinar. So I would also be very careful about that kind of communication too.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also slightly disagree in that I wouldn't put PR on hold, because PR is not just media relations, right? I think now is the time that we can be counseling our clients on what their position is, kind of feeding back into what you were talking about before, should they take a stand. And I agree with Raquel. I think that there's in many situations with social issues, it's not, I think you have to take a stand in many ways, right? You have to showcase what you are, where your position lies, or else you leave room for speculation. I also think there's a lot of clients that, as mentioned before, we work with SF Pride, right? I think a lot of organizations such as that will probably get questions about their stance. So I think we need to be counseling them as to what the reactive statement is if we are to get questions, just to make sure that we are prepared and ready to go out. Should we get those inquiries?
Yeah, some companies will, and some companies will not. We definitely let all of our clients know that if they do plan to react to this in any way, we'd love it if they ran that by us first, so that we could weigh in and make sure that it is something that's appropriate and advancing the narrative.
And a little more to Kathy's question, when do we think business will resume as usual? I think that's a tough question. I mean, what do you guys think? Like, this is going to be in the news for a while, what are we looking at here with a when?
I would say at least a week. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Until the next thing happens. And there will be another bigger thing. The January 6th hearings are still ongoing. So we're still getting.
Will there be a bigger thing? That is
true.
One. It feels really big.
No, this is a bigger than most breaking news stories. This is definitely the biggest one I've seen for quite some time.
And maybe it's how will the responses roll out? Because I think we're going to see, right, in the political arena and the media, we're going to see a series of, well, is the Congress going to act finally now? Or what will the Democrats roll over? Or will there be some will there be some bipartisan reaction to this that won't divide the states so brutally? Because what we'll see is, we have people talking about a new underground railroad or above ground railroad to help women who are, subject to draconian abortion laws. I think drawing the connection between Roe and Pride a little tighter is something we can do too. That we were talking a little bit earlier about the 14th Amendment, all of this. It's in particular this substantive due process clause of the 14th Amendment. And that is that due process clause says that your liberty can't be taken away from you without due process of law. And the question is, well, what's liberty, right? And back in 1973, and actually in Griswold versus Connecticut, protecting contraception, what's liberty? Your privacy over your own body and your relationship with your spouse or your lovers, that was viewed as something that is part of, fundamental liberty, and it was viewed as part of 14th Amendment clause. And now there's this effort to extract that, but that's what binds together, the case of Lawrence versus Texas, 2003. There's Texas again, right? But that's the case that decriminalized being gay. And that, again, how did they find that logic to strike down Texas's law that was it was about to put gay men in jail, and it did put one couple in jail, which is why there was standing to sue before the Supreme Court. And the reason, again, right there was that relationship between two consenting adults is none of the government's business, and that's protected by the liberty of the substantive due process clause. So that's, that's like the kind of the legal, at a, basic level, it's a legal connection. The 14th Amendment protecting all of these things, the different clauses of the 14th Amendment.
That's a lot. It's a lot to digest.
There's our government lesson today. But it's interesting. Aberja fell, and then that other really important clause, 2015, Aberja fell. That made gay marriage legal, right? And the question is, how will the Supreme Court look at the Equal Protection of the Laws clause now as well? Because those two clauses are right next to each other, and they're also logically tied together. Yeah.
We keep.
I do think it's interesting though, in terms of, I think this is obviously set up 2022 to be a very politically charged year because of all the implications that could come from this. So, I mean, that may be something in terms of, as you go into planning for PR efforts, you want to keep in mind, whether you choose to take a side or do some kind of social justice campaign. It'll be a very interesting year for playing off the news.
It's, Tom, that you're back now, and I hopefully
for now.
The DEI initiatives, we have a whole team of folks here at Bospar that work on this stuff, and they do fantastic work. What are some of the initiatives that Bospar is doing and has been doing in that space?
Well, we think of DEI in three ways. One, we think about it as what we're talking about now, which is external communications that is meant to motivate an industry. We also think about it with respect to internal communications. Have we done our bias training? Have we done some internal groups to support? And then we think about it in the third way, which is recruiting, right? It's extremely important to us to remain as diverse as possible. It is our strength. And so we have initiatives dedicated to bringing in those folks. Are we reaching out to Asian Americans? Are we reaching out to Black women? Are we reaching out to trans men? Are we reaching out to the Hispanic community? Thinking about it very, very holistically to make sure that we have as a variety of voices as possible. So that's how we generally think about our DEI programs. And you'll see, yet today, emanating from DEI is what we are doing with respect to Roe. And that's going to be very similar to our support and the message.
The messaging around that, I believe, is where he was going with that.
Well, I wonder, Brett, just based on what Tom was saying, do you guys think DEI programs will fail if the legal basis for them is struck down? Like, what will actually happen in reality across our country if companies are no longer required to? Because that goes back to this whole the what's happening legally and the connection between Roe, striking down the logic of Roe and all of these other things, right. The DEI initiatives. If companies are no longer required, will they, still embrace their DEI initiatives? We certainly hope so.
And I'm probably one of the more jaded people on this call right now because of my time spent working in news. It really does a number on you. But I would say that no, companies would continue to do it because, for one, it's obviously the right thing to do. But I also feel like, with the capitalism, let the market decide. We often hear that. People are clapping with their wallets at this kind of stuff. People are expecting that of companies. The younger generation, the millennials, that's, they want to know what your social positions are. They want to know that the money they're spending with you is going to help do something better. And I think if companies all of a sudden were like, well, the hell with it, we're just going to start doing our own thing, that I don't think that would be well received. I mean, you could certainly try it. You could go down that route. Look at, Mike Lindell's a great example of somebody who went down the route of, fraudulent election claims and all this other nonsense that he's made up. And and now his products have been removed from places because people don't want to see that.
Yeah. I also don't think that discontinuing DEI efforts would be good from a business standpoint. They've done numerous studies that have found that diversity of thought really is good for business, right? Obviously, you have all of one type of person in the room. You're all thinking very much the same way. Whereas if you have a collective of people from different backgrounds, it strengthens the business. So I would hope that HR would take that into effect.
I mean, we certainly heard that from we work with the Gangels, and that was one of the more interesting points that they made for us was just that he didn't want to. You could find the surveys online, but he said the same thing. If you've got 8 white men in the boardroom, you're going to have pretty much the same idea. If you mix it up a little bit and get that diversity of voices, you get a bit of a diversity in thought.
Yeah. I guess a lot of folks perceive there's still a long way to go in actual boardrooms, right? There's still a long way to go. And now if the laws become dismantled, what will happen? Because no one thought Roe would fall just a year ago. and now here we are. But, but I think, there's as companies that embrace DEI initiatives, I think it just goes to that argument of being more vocal and about it and about expressing your values as a company.
We have a good question here from the chat from Judith Cushman. Judy, do you think the elections will turn on this one issue for many women, and the midterm elections will be affected with a turn toward Dems?
It's hard to say because the panel is PR professionals, not commentators per se, but and political experts. But if you want an opinion, I think that the election cycle is long and memories are short. And so I think that if the Democrats want to make an issue of it, they need to be very repetitive and bring it up and make it an issue, not let it fall behind, because I think that this and the recent decision on guns and a number of other things all sort of lean toward Democrats' favor if they want to take advantage of it. I don't necessarily know if anyone's qualified to say right now in June if it's going to make if it's going to be the defining issue. The news cycle, as we know, can tend to change very quickly, and we're expecting an October surprise.
Yeah, but what I will say, I think it's very interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of enthusiasm around the presidential elections, right? But there's not as much energy devoted from a brand and PR perspective around the midterms. So it would be interesting, given again all that's going on in the political climate, to see if brands do make a bigger raise their voice during the midterm cycle this time, and maybe create some campaigns that'll get people out there to push them to vote.
Right. And it matters whether, people are voting single issue or multi-issue. This is certainly a big single issue. There are some single issue voters, but a lot of people also vote straight party lines. And so we'll have to, like you said, Tom, see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, messaging wise, it will be interesting to see how this plays out. Tom, you have a great point. November is 5 months away. And if you look back the past 5 months of everything that has caused outrage, can you think of 3? And most people probably may or may not be able to do that. So if at that point this will matter, you would certainly hope for that. It feels like we're kind of going through, like a lot of what we went through in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Like it's like a bit of a repeat here. I was reading a Quora answer, actually, of all things, about why suddenly are social issues becoming such a dominant talking point from the right, and the author who answered the question said it's the typical routine. It's every 20 or so years the right gets upset that we're making progress, and they start hammering away on these social issues that and for a very obvious reason. A social issue is something very easy to wedge between, because even the most I remember when gay marriage came up during George W.'s second election, I remember very good friends of mine saying, "I'm still going to vote for the guy. I don't care if he's going to pass it. He's not. I don't care about a constitutional amendment against gay marriage." And it's just like, but like Raquel said, there are single issue voters. They were more concerned with taxes and gun control and people being placed on the Supreme Court than they were about these other issues. But this is a very different one because it literally affects 50% of the population.
Right. And those, whether people, like Sean said, whether people turn out in the midterm elections will make all the difference. It really will. Whenever, there's a surge in the number of voters who come out, that tends to favor progressive causes. So we'll have to see whether that surge will take place.
Yeah, there could be, just from a news cycle standpoint, there could be a swing toward Democrats because of this, later in the next couple of months. But then if there is an indictment of Donald Trump, maybe that swings it in a different direction where there's backlash from supporters on his side saying, oh, it was a witch hunt, and now there's a lot of motivation there. So it's just, I think it's definitely a follow the news cycle and see what happens kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Any other, as we're winding down here towards the end. I know we talked a bit about the survey, and we talked about this, and we had it in our survey, and I just saw it in the last few hours on MSNBC. 64% do not support overturning Roe. That would be that's a majority of folks. We saw the same thing in our surveys. What is this yet another issue where corporate America may have to start taking a stand? I saw already within the last few hours, Dick's Sporting Goods put out a statement on social media saying that they'll pay for their employees to travel and get the health care and whatever that it is that they need. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, this is not the first time Dick's has taken a stand, because they also took a stand after the school shooting in Florida. They took a stand about removing guns, and there was a bit of a backlash, but it wasn't as big as everyone had hoped.
And the value of doing it is immeasurable. If there is a corporate uprising, if you will, that creates a lot of political pressure, and it also affects how ordinary citizens think about it. And so that then in turn puts pressure on congressmen to act. And so really that's how this stuff gets done, is just kind of grassroots, and it can be affected by what companies are saying.
And I think in general, brands have a pretty good sense of their demographics and their audience, and how what their political views are, and maybe those how they lean. So I think that they probably have a better sense of, depending on the brand, how safe they are, what the temperature of the water is, I guess, to make those statements. So I think it's an individual choice. I do think that obviously you risk polarizing or maybe alienating some of your people, but I do think that it's a really good opportunity to gain some maybe fans, brand fans that you maybe didn't have before because you did take a stand. So I think there's good case to be made for both.
Yeah, with so many women in the workforce, we're in 2022 and this is happening, right? So with so many women in the workforce, often in many leadership positions, and with the consumer buying power of women, right? It feels like a kind of, it's just a different quality of issue. It's just really cuts to the heart of America.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we're almost at time here. Any final thoughts from the group on all of the issues we've covered? Quite a broad stroke of information today.
I would ask you guys, what do you say to the women at our, just in a meeting right before this, right? The women at our company feel absolutely, I was on a call with our content team across the board. Every individual there feels shaken. And I would say, I bet a lot of PR firms are feeling this. A lot of companies client companies are feeling this. What's the best way to support our teams during, it's traumatic, really. It feels like a traumatic hit today.
It is. And, we put out a statement just reassuring folks that we will take action on a broader scale to react to this, but also from a micro company scale, people are shaken, and we want to make sure that we already have resources in place for people and encourage them to take sick time off if they need to just regroup. We did the same thing after Uvalde and a number of other things that just are really hard for people to accept. And sometimes, you're not giving us your best and you're just not in the right headspace to be at work that day. And I think it's important that companies let people know it's really okay to take some time, and then also just remind them of other services that we have, where we do have mental health care services through telehealth, and we have all of that covered, a variety of other things, just reminding folks where they can get help, because there is help, and then there are also ways to help. If you are a person who is more angry than shaken, there are resources out there and places you can go to contribute and help.
That's right. And our company has a number of those initiatives with partners helping social justice.
Yeah. And I would just add too, going into Pride weekend, obviously, I think this is just a reminder of how fragile freedoms are. So, for those of us who are out there celebrating this weekend, keep that in mind.
Yeah, I've definitely seen the posts on social media of people saying, for all of you who thought I was overreacting in 2016, now you know why. There is, I think social media is probably not the best place to go right now, because it's just going to make you angrier, or you're going to fall into an echo chamber that is somewhat satisfying. It is more people who are thinking the same way that you are and wanting to do the same things. It has been an unusual day. Raquel, you're absolutely right. A lot of the teams that I'm on, it's just been a lot of like, well, damn, now what? And it's tough, but yeah, it is a good time to stop and reflect. And Sean, you make a great point. I mean, with Pride weekend here upon us, I think it's easy for gay men and women who live in big cities or live in safe places to just feel like, oh, we've had all this great progress. We're doing great. Forgetting about the fact that there is a very, very vocal minority that controls part of the government that is actively trying to undo decades of progress that we have achieved. So we have to keep soldiering on.
And so many people across other states who don't feel safe the way we do. That's for sure. And
certainly in some states where you can still be fired for being openly gay is not a great position to be in. And again, as Tom mentioned several times, we are hiring and we are fully remote, and we're not going to fire you for being gay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're still connected. We got you.
Well, yep.
Excellent. Wow, we lost Tom. Well, I'll thank the panel. Oh, Tom's back.
Who knows if I'll be here for how long? So, but no, I appreciated that close up, and I was just gonna laugh at the we are hiring. But yeah, I mean, look, like guys, happy Pride weekend in San Francisco and Pride Month in general. There is room to celebrate, but we also understand there's work to be done, and it wasn't a job finished when we got gay marriage passed, and a lot of people moved on and thought, gosh, what's our next priority? And here we are back talking about it again. So I would encourage everyone to think about that as they're celebrating, what more we all can do from a civic minded standpoint to participate.
Absolutely. I'll be heading down to Washington, D.C., close to where I live this weekend to share some photos with our Bospar team of what's happening in the city, because it surely will be crazy, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm sure the protests will be happening. In addition to more celebrations, Pride Month is still happening in DC.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I will thank the panel of my colleagues, Tom, Sean, Raquel. Thanks for joining us today, spending some time. Great conversation. Hopefully everyone who was watching or who watches this back, as it has been recorded, will enjoy it as much as we enjoyed being here and presenting this to you. So with that, I will I will toss it back to Megan, who I believe is still connected, waiting in the virtual green room, as it were.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Bospar team. Just a lovely conversation. I've been watching you all from afar. I have friends that work there, like Sean. It's so good to see again. But you guys are doing amazing things, and I love it. And I'm proud to be a part of PRSA Silicon Valley and have you guys on board. So thank you so much. I know today is not easy, but I think you all provided a very insightful conversation. So thank you for joining us. Lastly, I just want to invite folks to join us every Friday for our Friday forums. You can sign up to join PRSA Silicon Valley on our website, as well as our LinkedIn and Facebook pages. I hope everybody has a nice weekend and celebrates Pride any way they need to, and have a great day. Thank you so much.